For the next 10 days, the flow of their lives remained constant. Wake up, go to the front, push back the droids, eat a meal, do some meditation, teach a few short lessons in Jedi things to Kaz, catch a few moments of sleep, and then do it all over again. Every day they would push the droids back further and further, gaining ground in the city by inches. Unfortunately, this torturous crawl of success was not going to cut it in the long run. Obi-Wan had come to this conclusion about a day ago, and he, Anakin, Cody, and Rex had been planning to set a trap for the Separatist army in order to take out most of their ground troops in one fell swoop instead of the death by flimsy cut way they had been doing things. Kaz had been with them the first 2 days at the front, but as they pushed the droids further and further back, the FOB became more secure, and he was left back in the infirmary under the eagle eyes of either Helix or Kix, whichever of them was slotted to care for their wounded that day. The first time he had been left behind, Kaz had put up his biggest fight so far. He never argued with either Obi-Wan or Cody, taking orders easily like every other trooper on the base, but in that moment, he had made his first attempt. Of course, Kaz's version of arguing and Anakin's were vastly different. Kaz had initially capitulated, then during innocuous conversation, would keep bringing up the possibility of his going with them to the front lines. Each time, he had been shot down. The mulish expression on his face had gotten stronger. This lasted up until Cody had lost his patience and had snapped at him that Kaz was to stay behind and that this was a direct order from his commander and that he better follow it or else. Kaz had completely abandoned the argument after that, growing unnaturally quiet for the rest of the day and not putting up a single protest over anything he was told to do afterward. Obi-Wan was concerned by this behavior, but every time he tried to address it, Kaz dodged his attempts, which grated something fierce. He did not want his Padawan to stew in whatever trauma Cody's protective outburst had accidentally dredged up, but he also did not want to make it worse by forcing Kaz to speak against his will. Cody and he had spent the night previous whispering about it like worried parents, barely getting any sleep themselves as they tried to work out how to help their charge. Cody felt positively awful about the whole thing, and it made his every interaction with Kaz awkward, which in turn made Kaz retreat even further into himself. In a last-ditch effort, Cody had enlisted Helix and Rex to try and talk to the cadet, but neither of those plans had borne fruit. Poor Cody was barely resisting pulling his hair out, and now, every time he saw Kaz, his Force presence curled in on itself and became the spikiest shell that Obi-Wan had seen it make to date. The feelings coming off Cody had started to alarm Obi-Wan too, and every night as he meditated, he searched for a solution to this mess before something irreparable happened. Anakin, Force bless him, had not been quiet and insular in his upset as a child, so Obi-Wan had no idea how to cope with a Padawan who was the direct opposite. Things tended to shatter and rattle when Anakin was upset, but Kaz drew so far into himself that his Force signature was little more than a distant matchlight. Even with this, Kaz did not falter in his studies. He was still a diligent and attentive student, another behavior that Obi-Wan did not know how to handle. Anakin had point-blank refused to do anything Obi-Wan had asked of him when upset, but Kaz became even more accommodating, so much so that they all had to stop talking about wanting anything near the boy, or he'd go out of his way to bring it to them and became silently upset when he could not. It had caused Cody a significant amount of distress the first time it had happened, enough so that it had flared in his barely there connection with Obi-Wan and made the both of them highly uncomfortable. The entire situation just made Obi-Wan want to escape Christophsis as soon as possible and fly as fast as the negotiator would take them to the Jedi Temple and sequester his Padawan away from the hurts of the galaxy. Quite frankly, if the turmoil in Cody got any worse, Obi-Wan would do it regardless of if they were finished on Christophsis or not. His commander and Anakin could manage the campaign without him for however long it took to sort Kaz out. Obi-Wan could scarcely stand the sight of both his apprentice and his commander slinking around like dejected tukas. His heart just couldn't bear it. Sighing, Obi-Wan shook himself from his unpleasant thoughts and stepped off the gunship that had carried him back from the front. Cody was next to him, and the moment the LAAT took off and left them alone on the landing pad, Cody's shoulders curved inwards and his gaze dropped to the floor. Cody was the perfect soldier on the battlefield and around his men, but the moment he was alone with either Rex or Obi-Wan, he just sagged. To add insult to injury, Cody had also stopped taking off his helmet unless required, and Obi-Wan longed to be able to look him in the eyes again when they spoke. Valiantly, Obi-Wan resisted the urge to put a hand on Cody's shoulder. Ooh. He'd done that yesterday and had garnered a rather negative reaction from it. Usually, Cody allowed Obi-Wan and his brothers to touch him, taking comfort from such a thing like every other trooper. Now, however, the commander was clearly denying himself that comfort as part of some self-imposed punishment that he would not snap out of. Even Rex was not allowed to touch Cody, and it made the captain give his brother an endless amount of worried yet resigned looks, clearly familiar with the behavior. As they meandered into the command center for an after-action report, Cody forced himself back into his usual ramrod-straight military posture before they crossed the threshold into the room. Anakin and Rex were already there, as well as Admiral Yularen, who was attending via hologram from the Resolute. Kaz was off in the corner that Anakin had claimed during that fateful call with the Council, arms crossed and amber eyes shuddered. He at least waved in greeting when Obi-Wan and Cody walked in, but that was a sharp contrast from his happily chirped greetings from before. Obi-Wan felt Cody's force presence flare painfully and stifled a wince. Yes, he needed to rectify this situation, and it needed to happen yesterday. Anakin gave the pair of them a worried look, but didn't comment. General Kenobi, Commander Cody, glad you can make it. Admiral Yularen greeted them, completely oblivious to the play-by-play in the room. Sorry we started without you, Obi-Wan, Anakin said apologetically. I wasn't sure when you'd make it back tonight. That's all right, Anakin. We were quite tied up out there for a moment, Obi-Wan dismissed easily. He looked over at Kaz and mustered a soft smile. Hello, Kaz. Did you have a good day? Kaz's smile was wobbly, but it was there, which was frankly better than yesterday. Yes, sir! Obi-Wan felt like a fist was clenching in his chest, but he kept up his smile and made sure his tone was gentle as he spoke. That's good. That's good. You'll have to tell me about it over late meal. Kaz just nodded, smile fading and arms pulling tighter around himself. Anakin gave Obi-Wan a concerned look that Kaz could not see, eyes motioning towards the cadet in a silent signal of, Please fix this right now, Master. I can't take it anymore. Obi-Wan's jaw clenched, and he aggressively tried not to feel like a complete and utter failure. Instead, he turned to Admiral Yularen as a semi-effective distraction from it all. Obi-Wan cleared his throat and spoke as calmly as he could. I'm glad we made it as well, Admiral. Thank you. What have you got for us? Gar intelligence has informed us that reinforcements for the blockade are on the way, Yularen said, shoulders flexing as his hands clenched behind his back. When they arrive, I fear our ability to provide air support may be limited, General. Also, communications back to Coruscant have become unreliable. They've worked out some way to jam our signals to keep them from getting through. The last clear communication we had was from 2 hours ago. So whatever we're going to do here, planet side, we better do it quickly, Anakin said, arms crossed and a considering look on his face as he gazed down at the battle map on the Yularen's hologram. I would strongly recommend haste, yes, Yularen agreed. Have you worked out a plan? We believe so, Obi-Wan took up the thread of the conversation. Our scouts have pinpointed the droid's base of operations. Now that we know the direction they'll be coming from for sure, we have devised an ambush. Anakin and I will lead them into the trap, wait for the bulk of their forces to be caught in its jaws, and then spring it in a two-pronged attack supplemented by the local militia. Obi-Wan reached out to the holodeck and called up the area of the city they were planning to use for this. Red circles along with little models of troopers and droids floated into position on the map. Obi-Wan pointed to them as he spoke. I will take the south tower. Anakin will take the north. We'll draw the enemy down through the street here and then ambush them in a flanking attack from above. This should take out the remaining forces in the city and give us control of the capital. I hope for all our sakes you succeed. Thank you, Admiral, Obi-Wan said. How are things on your end? As of now, going well. Well, we are winning our engagements, enough so that I believe we can weather these incoming reinforcements. My only concern is for your ground campaign, as when they arrive, we will be unavailable to assist. We'll be fine, Admiral, Anakin said with a smirk. Don't worry about us. You just keep at that blockade. We'll handle things down here. Of course, General Skywalker, Yularen said blandly. He nodded. May the Force be with you, and also with you. At that, Obi-Wan cut the connection, leaving only the blue holographic map of the city displaying in the holodeck. Anxiety gripped him like a vice, but he pushed it away. Well, best get some dinner and then sleep. Tomorrow will almost certainly be eventful. Oh, come on, Obi-Wan. You can't say that it's bad luck, Anakin protested, pushing away from his place at the other side of the holotable. He's right, General. Best not jinx it, Rex said with a laugh, idly shifting his grip on the helmet under his left arm. Tellingly, Cody was still wearing his. He didn't speak, just nodded in support of Rex's statement. Visor turned in the direction of Kaz, who was still in the back of the room leaning against the wall. Haltingly, Cody reached towards the cadet with the Force, trying to feel down their bond, but failing as he came across Kaz's shields. In a most infuriating turn of events, Kaz had figured out how to bolt his mental escape pod down tight and keep everyone out, staunchly refusing to open his mental hatch. Of course, now that he'd figured out how shielding actually worked, Kaz had lost his easy access to the Force and was struggling to do the things he previously had no problems with. He had not figured out how to simultaneously keep others from sensing his emotions while also allowing himself to access the Force when he needed it. In his bid to keep completely to himself, Kaz had managed to nearly cut himself off from the Force, only letting the slimmest trickle through. It was not working out for all involved. Cody's shoulders slumped minutely at the rebuff, but instead of slinking away to lick his wounds like he'd done for days, he walked over to the corner Kaz was hiding in, taking his helmet off and tucking it under his arm as he went. Obi-Wan winced at the brief view of his commander's face he managed to get. His expression looked like it was laser cut from stone, and he had large bags under his eyes, belying his lack of sleep. Obi-Wan, Anakin and Rex all shared a concerned look as Cody practically stormed past them, but none of them moved to stop him. Cody came to a halt 2 paces from Kaz, who had pushed off the wall to give himself better access to the exit and was watching Cody with wary eyes, obviously bracing for whatever Cody was about to dish out. For a moment, Commander and Cadet just stared at each other. Then Cody broke the silence. Look, I get that none of this is easy, Cody began haltingly, fingers clenching and unclenching along the underside of his helmet. But you don't have to hide in the corner silently all the time. I'm fine, Kaz responded, face perfectly blank. His presence in the Force didn't so much as twitch. You don't have to worry about me, Commander. Cody sighed, closing his eyes and rubbing at the center of his forehead with his free hand. I know that, just You're doing fine. Don't think you have to slink around. Right. Kaz blew out of breath, expression shifting from blank to vaguely bored. If that's all, sir? Cody's shoulders slumped and whatever fight he had mustered bled out of him. Yes, that's all, Cadet. Thank you, sir. Kaz nodded briskly, then stepped around Cody and came to a stop in front of Obi-Wan. Did you have anything for me, Master? I received the last batch of learning modules we're likely to get for a while, Kaz, Obi-Wan informed him regretfully. He spared a quick glance at his commander's back. Cody hadn't moved. He focused back on Kaz. I loaded them to your datapad already. Did you eat yet? Captain Helix took me to the mess earlier, Master. Kaz replied, looking everywhere but Obi-Wan's face. Obi-Wan resisted the urge to sigh. In that case, just do your meditation and start your lessons whenever you're ready. Yes, sir. Kaz nodded, cast a quick glance around the room, pausing briefly on Anakin and Rex before walking out, head high and gait military precise. He left deafening silence in his wake. Rex nudged Anakin towards the door as Obi-Wan walked over to Cody, who was still standing in the corner where Kaz had been. Anakin made a token protest, but Rex shut him down, practically shoving his general out the door and closing it behind them, leaving Obi-Wan and Cody alone in the room. The silence was even louder in the wake of their departure. Lightly, Obi-Wan walked around to look at his commander. Cody's eyes were closed, head bowed, and fingers twitching along the edges of his helmet. This time, Obi-Wan did sigh. And even though he knew Cody might not appreciate it, he reached out and laid a gentle hand on top of the other man's right arm, under his pauldron. Cody flinched, but Obi-Wan did not remove his hand. General, I'm fine. Cody opened his eyes and locked them with Obi-Wan's own. They were hard, shuttered, and revealed nothing. No, you're not. Obi-Wan's disagreement was instant. You haven't slept properly for 3 nights now, and you've been in the thick of it on the front just as much as I have. You hardly take your helmet off, and you won't let anyone near you. Cody wrenched his arm out of Obi-Wan's grip and stalked away a few paces, whirling around to glare at his general. His force signature was sharper than Obi-Wan had ever felt it, and it was digging painfully into Obi-Wan's shields. Cody was one of the few people Obi-Wan had met who could weaponize their mental shielding. I don't need you to babysit me, sir. I can take care of myself. Cody's glare was lethal, and the force around him swelled with his emotions, buffeting against Obi-Wan's own mental defenses. I'm fine. He's just one lousy cadet. I can handle it. Clearly you can't. Obi-Wan's legendary patience chose that moment to flee the scene. His own feelings about this situation were threatening to choke him with their potency, and he lashed out back at Cody, striking against the Beskar spikes of Cody's shields, causing both of them to wince. You're short-tempered, unfocused, and your guilty conscience is driving us all to distraction. My guilty conscience? What about yours? He jabbed a finger in the air irately in Obi-Wan's direction, shout reverberating along the durasteel walls of the room. Obi-Wan opened his mouth to retort, then snapped it shut with an audible clack, closing his eyes and breathing in deep and slow, releasing the anger he was feeling into the Force. It would not do to get into a shouting match with Cody. That was the last thing either of them needed. Clearly, they were not handling this situation well at all. But of the two of them, Cody definitely seemed worse for wear. The Force was telling him there was something else under the surface that was adding to his commander's distress. Obi-Wan aimed to find it and excise it before any more damage was done. I'm not going to fight with you, Cody, Obi-Wan said gently as he opened his eyes. He gave Cody an imploring look, hands out and palms up in supplication. I want to help. Will you let me? Cody's face twisted up into a snarl and he looked poised to snap back only to stop, visibly wrenching back control of himself. He swallowed, muscles in his jaw jumping as he clenched his teeth. A deep furrow was between his brows, his lips were a thin slash on his face, and his eyes blazed, but his Force presence pulled back and cooled, settling back to its usual defensive posture. Shoulders rising and falling with each breath, Cody placed both hands on his helmet and began to spin it idly in the same way Rex did sometimes. Shoulders rising and falling with each breath. "I'm sorry, General. I didn't mean to take this out on you, sir," Cody said, locking eyes with Obi-Wan. "Apology accepted," Obi-Wan replied easily. "But Cody, I can't help you if you don't tell me what's going on. You're far too upset for it to just be the situation with Kaz, Commander. What is truly bothering you?" Cody's face smoothed out into a soldier-blank mask, and his hands stilled on his helmet. "It's nothing, General. I'll get it squared away before the ambush." Obi-Wan's lips pulled down, expression falling, blue eyes reflecting sympathy. "Cody, please. Whatever this is, it's doing its best to swallow you. Let me help you. Tell me what's wrong." The spikes on Cody's Force presence jabbed out briefly before the commander yanked them back. The only thing showing on his face was the jumping muscle of his jaw as it twitched his scar. "Thank you, sir, but I've got it." "Yes, but you don't have to." Obi-Wan's tone and face were pleading. I know that." Cody's voice was soft, almost a whisper. He looked away, staring at some point beyond Obi-Wan's shoulder. "But..." Obi-Wan prompted gently when Cody didn't continue. Cody heaved a sigh, shoulders slumping and eyes dropping to stare down at the floor in front of Obi-Wan's boots. His features danced as he warred with himself before his head snapped up and he looked at Obi-Wan. The Jedi held in a startled gasp. Gone was the flinty-eyed look from before, replaced by a ragged desperation that Obi-Wan had never once seen on his commander. I could hear it in his thoughts. Cody's voice was rough, like he was choking back a powerful emotion. His breathing began to kick up, and the words started tumbling from his lips like he couldn't stop them. I've never heard anyone that clear, but I heard him. He thought that I was just like them, that all I wanted was for him to be a good soldier and follow orders. I don't. I can't. I'm not like them." Obi-Wan's eyes were round, brows raised, and jaw loose as he stared at Cody in shock. He shook himself out of his stupor and strode a few paces over to Cody in a blink, hands coming up to rest on his commander's shoulders. He looked Cody in the eyes, blue gaze intense as he stared into Cody's amber orbs. "You listen to me, Cody." Obi-Wan's voice was firm, and he gave Cody's shoulders a light shake. "You are nothing like the Kaminoans, do you hear me? I don't think you are, and neither does Kaz. Kaz is an upset, traumatized child who is having difficulty processing that trauma and is lashing out at the people near him. He doesn't blame you, and his issue is not with you. It's not your fault. Do you understand?" As Obi-Wan spoke, Cody's eyes got wider and his expression went from pained to stunned. He swallowed audibly, the sound carrying in the sudden quiet of the room. "I understand." Obi-Wan's lips tipped up in a smile, but it was not a happy one. "Good." He gave Cody's shoulders a firm squeeze, then dropped his hands. He kept his eyes locked to his commander's as he spoke. "I want you to know that for someone who has absolutely no experience with children, you're doing an excellent job. We all make mistakes, Cody, and this is certainly not the last time it will happen. All you can do is learn from it and move on. You're doing fine. It doesn't feel like I'm doing fine, Cody said, gaze drifting away from Obi-Wan's face to stare at the wall again. It feels like I'm doing awful. I keep making it worse. Obi-Wan huffed a rueful chuckle. You aren't. I promise you. Kaz can see you trying. He just doesn't know how to process that. He shook his head. Have you noticed he follows us around? He tries to keep his distance, hide his presence, but he follows us. In fact, he's out in the hall right now. He wants to interact, but he's afraid. Just keep trying, Cody. We'll get through to him before long. It'll be all right. I hadn't noticed that, Cody groaned out, rubbing a hand over his mouth. I didn't even see him. I can't believe I missed that. In your defense, Obi-Wan said with his first genuine smile in the last few days, he was able to hide himself from the entirety of Tipoca City for hours before we found him. I wouldn't feel too bad about it, Commander. Cody shook his head and smiled ruefully at Obi-Wan. I suppose that's true, sir. He's pretty slippery. Indeed. Obi-Wan patted Cody's shoulder. Now, I do believe it's time for late meal, don't you? Yes, sir. He could feel Kaz following him. The boy's forced presence was so muted it almost wasn't even there, but Obi-Wan could still track him through their training bond. He didn't feel much from it, just a light tugging sensation that told him Kaz was nearby and alive. Obi-Wan paused near the lift, staring at it in brief contemplation before taking a chance and stepping inside. He pressed the key for the roof and leaned back against the wall as the lift jerked into motion. The door opened with a soft swish of air, and Obi-Wan stepped out onto the roof, eyes staring up at the flickering blanket of stars above his head. Cool night air teased against his face and neck, and he crossed his arms over his chest. He simply stood there for a long moment, taking in the peaceful atmosphere and reveling in the solitude before dropping his gaze to the dim, crystalline skyline ahead of him and settling in to wait. A few minutes later, he wasn't disappointed as the lift hissed open again, and Kaz stepped out, leather boots crunching on the small bits of gravel on the roof as he made his way gingerly over to Obi-Wan. He stepped up next to his master, hands coming up to grip at the edges of his chest plate right below his collarbone. They stood together in silence for a few long minutes before Obi-Wan spoke. Did you do your meditation yet, Padawan? Yes, Master. Kaz answered back, voice catching. He cleared his throat. Yes, I did. Obi-Wan nodded but didn't pull his gaze away from the city. Good. Kaz blew out a long breath. I don't. He paused, swallowing, throat clicking with the action. Nothing feels right. How so? Obi-Wan prompted gently. Everything's all jumbled up. Kaz said at length. He sighed again. It doesn't make sense anymore. What doesn't make sense? Obi-Wan shifted, looking away from the city at night to take in his apprentice. Kaz looked tired. Less so than Cody, but still tired. His fluffy hair was slightly greasy, but still straight and spiky atop his head. His armor was covered in dirt and lightly scuffed, telling the tale of the 2 days he'd spent shooting at droids, and his blaster was clipped snugly into its holster, freshly scrubbed. He looked like any trooper after a battle, only not nearly so grown as the rest. Still, Obi-Wan could see the potential, the beginnings of the warrior that Kaz would grow up to be. Beneath the anger, the sadness, and the anxiety, there was a core of steel. All of it, none of it, I don't know. Kaz burst out suddenly. He grit his teeth and shook his head. I can't feel anything when I reach out, and I know that's my fault, but I can't seem to stop it. It feels like there isn't enough air on this whole planet for me to breathe. Peace, Kaz. Obi-Wan reached out and turned the boy to face him. Kaz looked up at him, the conflict raging inside of him shining out from his eyes. I understand. It's perfectly normal what you're feeling. It's okay. It's not okay, Kaz exclaimed, hands gesturing wildly in the air as he continued. I'm making everyone upset, and when I try to fix it, it just gets worse. I don't know what to do. You don't have to do anything, Obi-Wan answered, grabbing Kaz's wrists and pulling the boy's hands from his head before he could start yanking at his hair. There's nothing for you to do other than to talk to me, or Cody, or Rex, or Helix, or even Anakin about what you're feeling and let us help you deal with it. It is not your job to make us feel better, Padawan. Quite the opposite, actually. Kaz pulled on his wrists, trying to snatch them away, but Obi-Wan held on tightly. Kaz glared at him, but stopped resisting. I don't know what to say. Then sit with me and meditate, Obi-Wan answered. I can help you release this into the Force, to process it and let it go, but you have to let me, Kaz. Kaz clenched his jaw and gave Obi-Wan his most defiant look, yet then slumped, all the fight draining out of him like water through a sieve. He nodded. Okay. Obi-Wan let go of his wrists. Okay. He dropped to the ground where he stood, sitting cross-legged and looking expectantly up at Kaz. There was still a reluctant set to Kaz's jaw, but he sat down anyway, settling into the now familiar meditation pose opposite Obi-Wan. Kaz knew the first steps well enough to do them on his own now, and closed his eyes, regulating his breathing and visualizing his mindscape without help. Obi-Wan followed him, sinking easily into the first steps of the meditation and reaching out along the bond to wrap a mental fist on Kaz's escape pod hatch. At first, nothing happened, but Obi-Wan stayed there, his mental presence expectant and waiting for Kaz to choose to trust him. Enough time passed that Obi-Wan thought Kaz had changed his mind. But then suddenly, the hatch began to creak open. The door seal hissed on Kaz's mental sanctuary, and Obi-Wan felt the boy's Force presence solidly for the first time in a week. Kaz's shields opened more, the hatch to his escape pod swinging open halfway, and the turmoil the boy was feeling crashed over Obi-Wan like a wave. Anchoring himself in the Force, Obi-Wan waded into the mess that was Kaz's feelings, reaching for the different tangled strands and pulling them apart like taffy. This he was used to. He had helped Anakin do this many a time, until his former apprentice had decided he did not need Obi-Wan's help any longer and pushed Obi-Wan away. Away. Once Kaz noticed what his master was doing, he lurched to help, giving a solid mental kick to the feelings that Obi-Wan managed to pry loose. Once Kaz noticed what his master what, laboring in tandem, they pulled at each negative feeling that was trying to drown Kaz and expelled them into the Force. As they worked, Kaz's Force presence became lighter and lighter, the tight clench of his shields easing and his connection to the Force getting wider and wider with each passing moment. His apprentice's Force signature flared back, engine bright, like it had been the day they met, before settling back to that idle thruster glow it had become. The turmoil and tension that had plagued the boy for the last week was all but gone. The little that remained easily managed. Kaz reveled in the feeling of the living Force, letting it flow through him and around him, soaking it up like a plant in the desert. He reached out, touching the little stars of his brothers spread out across the city and the ones in the base below them with reverence. Skirting the edges of Anakin's nova-bright fire, he zeroed in on the now peacefully sleeping Rex, nudging the liquid blue of the captain's steady presence in the Force before moving on to the contentedly simmering Helix, and finally stopping on the spiky sunburst that was Cody in the Force. The commander was still awake, and his force presence snapped out like a whip, eagerly brushing up against Kaz's like a touch-starved loth cat. Cody's own tangled feelings rippled down their bond before the commander pulled them back, practically shoving reassurance and apology at Kaz in their place. Kaz nudged him back, accepting, letting Cody feel his own regret before reluctantly pulling away and rising out of the meditation. Blinking in the dim light of the stars, Kaz stared at Obi-Wan, who looked placidly back at him. "Mine?" Ku looked. Their calm accord hummed down the bond between them, and they simply took a moment to bask in the peace of it before pushing to their feet. Kaz rubbed sheepishly at the back of his head and gave Obi-Wan a small smile. "I'm sorry, Master Obi-Wan." He dropped his hand and shook his head. "I guess I should have done that sooner." "Yes, probably." Obi-Wan agreed, placing a hand between Kaz's shoulders and guiding him towards the lift. "But it's in the past now, Padawan. All that's left to do is learn from it for the next time." Kaz winced at the thought of next time as they stepped into the lift. "Griff, I hope there isn't a next time." "There will be," Obi-Wan said with absolutely certainty. "Don't fret over it. It will happen when it happens. And just like now, you will learn from it and become all the better for it." Footsteps echoed from somewhere around the corner, and suddenly their source came skidding into view. It was Cody, the upper half of his armor discarded, leaving him in just his blacks and the bottom half of his gear. His eyes were slightly wild as he jogged up to them, stopping in front of Kaz. Cody reached out to put his hands on Kaz's shoulders, then stopped, arms hanging awkwardly in the air as he realized such an action might not be welcome. Awkwardly, he cleared his throat and let his hands drop to his sides. He gave Obi-Wan an apologetic look before focusing on Kaz with an almost single-minded intent. Are you okay?" As he spoke, Cody barely checked the urge to fidget. Kaz rolled his eyes and darted forward, wrapping his arms around Cody's middle in a hug. The commander shot a wide-eyed, panicked look at Obi-Wan before hesitantly reaching up and wrapping his own arms around Kaz's small, armored shoulders. The boy's plastoid chest plate was digging uncomfortably into his ribs, but in that moment, Cody couldn't bring himself to care. "Yeah, I'm okay," Kaz mumbled into Cody's chest. "I'm sorry for upsetting you." "It's all right, kid," Cody whispered back, right hand leaving its spot on Kaz's back to run through the cadet's hair. He gently scrubbed the pads of his fingers on the boy's scalp, making Kaz hum contentedly. "It's all right. I'm just glad you're okay." Kaz chuckled lightly. "Yeah, me too." Obi-Wan stepped up to the pair of them after a moment, resting one hand on the back of Kaz's neck, the other on Cody's shoulder. The other man was warm under Obi-Wan's hand, and he could feel the definition of Cody's muscles working under his blacks. They stood there, absorbing the comfort of the quiet for a minute before Kaz pushed away and smiled up at Cody. Obi-Wan let his hands fall and crossed them lightly over his chest, just for somewhere to put them. "Thanks, Cody," Kaz said, suddenly. He yawned, hands coming up to cover his mouth. I'm tired. It's late and we've got a big day tomorrow," Cody said, guiding master and apprentice towards the barracks. "It's time for all of us to go to bed." "Yes, quite," Obi-Wan agreed, fighting back his own yawn. They had an ambush to execute tomorrow. Sleep was essential to their success. Wakefulness found them all too early, the sun's glow barely passing the horizon in a pre-dawn luminescence. The stars were still out, 1/3 of the sky lighter than the rest, and the moon dangled like a glittering jewel almost entirely obscured by the city. Overnight, their two best scouts, Waxer and Boyle, had snuck out into the city and planted the bait for their ambush with some help from the local militia, and now the rest of the squads were loading up and heading out to get into position. Kix was on duty today, which meant it was Helix's turn to stay behind and mind the patients in the infirmary. The 2-on-12th medic was mildly jealous, but he was also looking forward to continuing to train Kaz in the art of being a medical assistant. He had started doing it as a way to distract the cadet, but it had turned out that Kaz was a far more useful assistant than a droid, especially since he could sense in the Force when a patient was about to take a turn for the worse. Kaz had awoken with the rest of the men, rolling out of his bed on autopilot and following them out to the loading area. He trailed after Commander Cody, sleepily rubbing his eyes and yawning every few minutes. Helix watched him, noting whatever had been bugging the cadet yesterday appeared to have resolved itself overnight, and felt a smile tugging at his lips. Helix had to stifle a laugh when he noticed Commander Cody kept glancing over his shoulder, making sure his half-height shadow was still behind him as he did his last-minute inspection. Helix pressed a closed fist to his mouth, hiding his grin. Cody had clearly inherited whatever gene it was that made the Prime want a cadet of his own. The commander was like a mother-loth wolf, checking to make sure his little pup was right where he was supposed to be. His adorable, earnest, sleep-rumpled pup that was only in his cute utility belt with blaster and boots. Really, he looked like a little Mando ad trailing after his boar. Helix had to bite knuckle to stifle his laughter when Cody motioned Kaz over and began pointing things out to him, showing the cadet how to check the heavy cannons, assess the tie-down straps, and run a self-diagnostic on the guns. He completely lost the fight against his giggles when General Kenobi walked up to them, arms crossed, left hand alternating between stroking his beard and pointing out things as he started giving Kaz instructions, looking over the next cannon himself. Helix mentally corrected the picture to a Mondo Wad and his buyer. Really, he thought to himself, the commander was fooling absolutely no one. The general, Helix reflected, was much harder to read. A hand clapped down on Helix's shoulder, startling him from his fit of laughter. "Breathe, Vod, you're turning colors." Helix took a gasping breath, using every shred of his self-control to stop laughing and speak. Yeah. Thanks, Rex. What's so funny anyway?" Rex asked, looking out across the loading zone, eyes assessing. "Commander and the kid." Helix pointed over to said commander and child. General Kenobi had since abandoned them for conversing with General Skywalker. "Wait, what?" Rex's eyes snapped over to Cody and Kaz, noting the relaxed body language and easy camaraderie of the two that was visible even from across the load zone. "Mari, when did that happen?" "I don't know. Sometime last night, I think." Helix answered with a shrug. "After I went to sleep for sure." "Thank Criff." Rex blew out in a relieved sigh. He chuckled. "I thought Cody was going to combust from all that pent-up angst if they didn't work it out. I think he was about to blow that night." Helix laughed, shaking his head. He was tense. More tense than I'd seen him since ARC training. "Seems to have figured it out, though." Rex gestured over to Cody, who was kneeling, reaching down and tugging on a tie-down strap that was improperly secured, showing Kaz how to do it the right way. "That is Cody in full Orivod mode if I've ever seen it." "No, that's a new mode," Helix said gleefully, excited to share his revelation with someone else. "That's Burr mode, right there. He looks just like Prime with Boba." Oh, sick Helix, he does!" Rex exclaimed, the hand not holding on to his helmet coming up to rest on the back of his head. "And look at Kaz. He's like a tiny little Verd. I don't believe it." Helix lost the battle with his laughter again, doubling over and resting his hands on his knees in the face of Rex's astonishment. Rex tried to contain his own hilarity and utterly failed, resulting in the two of them leaning against each other and gasping for breath through their giggles.
Just what's so funny?
Helix and Rex both snapped up straight at the new voice, still periodically snickering as they looked at Cody. The commander had his helmet on, arms crossed over his chest and his hip cocked at an angle. They didn't need to see his face to know he had a completely unimpressed look on it. They could feel the force of it through the bucket's visor. Next to him was Kaz, who was covering a yawn with one hand, the other wrapped around Cody's utility belt, clutching the commander like a stuffed toy. Rex and Helix looked at each other and lost it all over again. Cody's sigh was a loud scratch of static from his vocoder. "You two better not be high off sleep deprivation or we'll be having words." No, they slept. This came from Kaz, who looked more alert in the face of their merriment. "I can sense it. They're awake." "Kid, you're barely awake," Rex said after he'd gotten control of himself again. Helix was still sporadically chuckling, unafraid in the face of Cody's displeasure. Helix seemed impervious to every version of Cody's glare. Rex wondered if it was possible to learn this power. "I'm not awake," Kaz corrected, yawning so hugely that Rex would swear he heard the kid's jaw crack. "No, you're not." Cody agreed with an exasperated shake of his head. He nudged Kaz between his shoulder blades towards Helix. "Stay with Helix. Maybe if you ask nicely, he'll let you take a nap." Kaz just nodded, stumbling the few steps to Helix and letting his forehead thunk right in the center of the medic's chest plate, using it to prop himself up, arms swinging limply at his sides. Helix rolled his eyes and put his hands on his hips, staring down at the top of Kaz's head with an unimpressed look. "I am not your pillow, Vodika. Are now." Rex gave the kid a pat on his bony shoulder, then moved to join Cody. "We'll be back later, kid."
"See you at late meal tonight."
Cody turned to leave as well, but lingered, looking at Kaz, reluctance written in the lines of his body. "Helix, keep him safe." "I will, Cody. Hot, ja, hot. Jade, fly, in tie." He reached out, ruffling Kaz's short hair. "I'll see you later, kid." "Koyathi, Cody." Kaz mumbled, head still resting on Helix's chest. "Ketershi-imi, Kazika." With that, Cody gave Helix one last intense look from behind his visor before turning to follow Rex to the loading zone. Helix watched Cody go and pass General Kenobi, who was heading in the opposite direction. They conferred briefly, then continued, Kenobi coming towards Helix and Kaz and Cody moving with Rex towards the gunships. General Kenobi walked up to them smiling, blue eyes drawn to the slumped, almost limp form of Kaz standing in front of Helix. "All set, Captain?" Kenobi greeted, "Yes, General." Helix answered, returning the smile. He rested a hand on Kaz's shoulder. "I have a fun and educational day planned for the cadet. Thank you for doing this, Helix." The general said with genuine gratitude, "I know minding young Padawans is not in your job description." "No, it's not, but he doubles as a vital signs monitor, so it's all good, sir." Helix said with a bright grin and a pack to Kaz's head. It was the general's turn to laugh, shaking his head at Helix. "Well, so long as you're happy with it, I suppose." He sobered, reaching out to ruffle Kaz's hair, then locking eyes with Helix. "Still, Vorentai, Helix." "Of course, General." "Whoa! He's my Vod, too." "Yes, he is." The general focused his attention on Kaz once again. "All right, Padawan. Please mind Helix. Cody and I will see you later tonight. Kaz pushed away from Helix at that, turning to look at his master. He rubbed his eyes and stifled a yawn. I know. I'll be here. Koyasi. Master Obi-Wan, may the Force be with you. Koyasi Kazika. Kazika. And also with you. General Kenobi bowed, and Kaz mirrored it. Then he turned and departed for his gunship. Kaz and Helix stood there, watching the hustle and bustle as the squad split off into their assigned gunships and depart, heading for their predetermined positions in the ambush. When the last LAAT disappeared from view, Helix herded the cadet back inside, intending to deposit him in the barracks for some extra hours of shut-eye. Clearly, sorting out his emotional issues last night had kept him up late, and as they were all awake before the sun, the kid was a barely conscious zombie. Kaz was only 6 and was still growing, and being that he was a clone, he was growing faster than the average human male his age, which meant he needed both more calories and more sleep. Helix intended to let him sleep past morning meal and made a mental note to snag the cadet a plate before the mess closed. He could keep it in the infirmary until Kaz showed up and force-feed it to the kid then. The wind whipped through Obi-Wan's hair as the gunship soared through the air, intent upon the tower that Ghost Company had been assigned. Waxer and Boyle were already there waiting for them, having stayed the night with the local civilian militia after setting up the beacon they were using as bait to draw out the droid army. Joining them in their tower was also Sergeant Slick's squad. Obi-Wan had worked with them on and off for the last week, and found them to be competent and capable troopers. Standing next to Obi-Wan in his customary spot was Commander Cody. In a sharp contrast to yesterday, today Cody was laser-focused, energized, and ready to go. Obi-Wan was glad to see it, thankful that the commander and his Padawan had worked out their struggles. He did rather enjoy watching Cody and Kaz interact, taking delight in the way Cody did things purely on some deeply ingrained instinct that even the commander himself did not seem to understand. Whatever quirk of genetics that had possessed Jango Fett to request an unaltered clone for himself had obviously been passed on to Cody. Both Rex and Helix were good with Kaz, treating him like the kid brother he appeared to be, but Cody took it that much farther, pushing past an older brother's role and straight to that of parent. Cody worried and outright fussed over Kaz, and he had been completely inconsolable when Kaz had been upset. It was truly a thing of beauty to witness. What do you think of our chances, General? Cody's question interrupted Obi-Wan's thoughts, snapping him out of his reverie. If all goes to plan, quite good, Obi-Wan answered, having to raise his voice to be heard over the wind. He gave Cody a considering look. Something on your mind, Commander? I don't know, sir, Cody replied, shaking his head. He switched the hand he was using to grip the loop above his head. Just a feeling, I guess. Ah, Obi-Wan muttered, reaching up with his free hand to rub over his top lip. Obi-Wan felt apprehension sink in to settle in his gut. I see. I don't think it's anything to worry about, sir. Cody gave an aborted shrug, trying to downplay what was shaping up to be a decent case of the jitters. I'm afraid that ship sailed, Cody. Obi-Wan gave him a rueful look. I feel it too. Then we'll just have to be extra careful, sir, Cody said, resigning himself to the fact that this mission was likely not going to go as planned. He'd had this feeling before, but it had never been as sharp or as clear as it was now. It stood to reason that his choice to start trying to use the Force OSIC that had made his life hell in training had had an effect on his ability to sense trouble. He'd always had a nose for when things were going to go straight to hell in a handbasket. But this was like a visceral twisting in his guts, not just a strong hunch. It was making the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end, and he didn't like it at all. Don't center on your anxieties, Cody, Obi-Wan said over the roar of the ship's engines and the billowing of the wind. We started down this path and it's too late to go back. Only onward, Commander. Cody nodded once, helmet bobbing sharply. Only onward, sir. Before long, they were at the drop point and getting off the gunship onto the roof of the South Tower. The sun had just started to peak over the horizon, the vibrant orange rays contrasting sharply with the green glass of the architecture around them. Half of Ghost Company plus Slick's squad disembarked with them, the other half of Ghost Company going with the small squad from Torrent that Rex and General Skywalker had taken with them to the North Tower. The plan was not reliant upon large numbers of troopers on the ground, instead focused on the various heavy cannons they were going to set up strategically, as well as the road that Waxer, Boyle, and the local militia had pre-mined the night before. Also, arrayed along the ground and the bridges between the buildings was what passed for Christophsis' army, lying in wait for the droids to march into their trap, the main ground force of the ambush. Cody split up with his crew, getting the guns installed and set up in the right location, and then, once that was done, taking off and checking on everyone else, making sure all the positions they had chosen were locked in and ready to go. It took the better part of the morning, and by the time they were finished, the sun had well and truly risen, the orange light giving way to the golden burn of natural daylight. After finishing the inspection of the last fortification, Cody boarded the lift with Sergeant Slick, and the two made their way to General Kenobi's position. Cody looked over at Slick as the doors closed, assessing the other man with a careful eye. Something about him had pinged along Cody's spine the day they had met in the yard to train with Kaz, and that same feeling was hounding Cody now, though for the life of him, he could not figure why. "Your men ready to go, Sergeant?" Cody asked, deciding that maybe a few probing questions would help him work out just exactly what it was that was bothering him. "Yes, sir, Commander," Slick said readily, eyes shining eagerly, ready to kick some clanker ass and then some.
"We won't let you down."
Cody bit back an irritated noise when that blasted feeling in his gut only got worse at Slick's response. Honestly, he was about done with this whole force thing if all it was going to do was make his breakfast sit like a stone in his intestines. He didn't know how the general could stand this. It had been barely a 10-day, and it was already driving him to drink. "Good to hear, Slick," Cody said after a pause that was just a hair too long to be casual. His voice sounded oddly wooden to his ears, and he wished he was wearing his helmet, but it was tucked uselessly under his left arm. "You all right there, Commander?" Slick gave Cody an odd look, shifting his own helmet from one arm to the other. "Fine, Sergeant." Cody barely stopped himself from snapping. Annoyance lanced through him, and he yanked on the ball of Beskar spikes in his mind, flinging it out wide and adding layers to it the way he did in training when he didn't want to feel any feelings that did not belong to him. The barely perceptible tension in his shoulders loosened, and Cody relaxed a fraction. Apparently he'd been picking up on his environment again. Hells, but this was 10 different kinds of distracting that he did not need. If this kept happening, he was going to ask the general to teach him how to turn it off. Forever. It was going to make him crazy. Blessedly, the lift came to a stop before Slick could answer, and they stepped out onto the 46th floor, the one that the general had chosen because it had the best angle to see the droid army as it approached. "We're back, General," he called out as they walked over to the window where General Kenobi was waiting. General Kenobi lowered his viewfinder and grinned. "Welcome back, Commander Sergeant." "Everything ready?" "As it'll ever be, sir," Cody replied, coming to a stop next to Obi-Wan. He accepted the viewfinder. The general handed it to him, lifting it to his eyes and scanning the horizon. He could see the army just at the end of the viewfinder's range. "Looks like they're mustering up, General. They'll be moving out soon." "Yes, that was my thought as well." Obi-Wan agreed, taking back the scanner and holding it loosely in his right hand. Cody nodded and turned to the crew Slick had stopped at. They were hunched over a heavy cannon, one of the men elbowed deep in its guts as they tried to figure out what was wrong with it. "How's that cannon coming, boys? We'll have this one back in business in no time, sir." This enthusiastic statement came from Chopper, the man with his arms inside the wiring of the cannon. "Good man!" Cody gave him an acknowledging nod. He moved to shift back towards the general, and when he did, Slick caught his eye again. The sergeant was standing off to the side, a few paces away from the rest of the men, making it look like he wasn't a part of them. This, for some reason he could not explain, bothered Cody immensely. He had no explanation for it. There was nothing at all wrong with what Slick was doing. It was just an unsettling, instinctive reaction that was setting his teeth on edge. He knew it was some carking force Osik again, and he tightened his grip on his shields, absently noting that they had not so much as twitched since the elevator. Damn. Dread curdled in his stomach like spoiled blue milk. This mission was 2 steps away from going tits up. He knew it with a certainty that he knew Kamino was wet. Pins and needles traveled from the base of his neck down his spine, sending goosebumps skittering along the flesh of his thighs. He jammed his bucket on his head and unclipped his DC-15A from where it was hanging on his belt, bringing it up to lower ready. "Cody!" The general's voice interrupted his thoughts, and Cody's head whipped around to stare at him through the HUD in his helmet. "Everything all right?" Cody paused, realizing that it had gone quiet and that all the men were staring at him. He threw his shoulders back and stiffened his spine, oozing confidence from every pore. The tension in the room seemed to drop. "Yes, sir. Just getting ready for when the clankers arrive." General Kenobi sent him a mildly skeptical look but didn't push it, reading both the commander and the mood of the room. "Very good, Commander." A shout of triumph split the air, and Cody looked over to see a victoriously grinning Chopper stand from his crouch beside the heavy gun he was repairing. "Cannon's operational, Commander. Good work, Chopper." General Kenobi brought the viewfinder up to his eyes again, carefully scanning the road before them. They're mobilizing. The show is about to begin. Slick joined them in front of the window, raising his own viewfinder to his eyes. "Looks like they're advancing, sirs. I'm seeing a full battalion, and they're going to be right on schedule." Cody's eyes narrowed, appraising Slick carefully behind the visor of his helmet. Something was still bothering him, and the feeling was just getting worse. He looked over at General Kenobi, only to be met with an intense blue-eyed stare. The general's gaze was critical, assessing, looking past Cody's armor and down to the core of him. Whatever he saw caused the general's mouth to turn down and his brows to furrow. Well, that was certainly not good. "I've got tanks in the viewfinder, Commander." Slick interrupted their staring match. "Looks like a whole platoon of them." "Good. We'll take some of their heavy equipment down along with the droids," the general said, lifting his own scanner up and surveying the advancing army. "That would be nice." This came from Waxer, who was sat behind a cannon of his own, hands on the controls, ready to lay waste to the enemy as soon as the command was given. "Less stuff left over to try and blow us up with." "Yeah, I don't know about that, Waxer," Boyle said doubtfully. "Listen, a brother can dream, all right?" Waxer shot back, punching his friend in the shoulder. "Ow, Wax. Easy." Cody ignored them both in favor of scanning the road through the window. The uncomfortable sensation that had started up the moment they were in the air this morning was practically boiling through his blood now. His hands were tingling, fingers clenching around his weapon, the muscles in his jaw jumping in time with his pulse, and a lone bead of sweat was making its slow descent down his back. Every inch of him was on edge. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. Come on. Just a little closer," Slick mumbled to himself, viewfinder practically glued to his eyes. Suddenly, He made a dismayed sound. "Oh, Criff, they're splitting up. Wait, what?" Cody demanded, alarm bolting through him from the tips of his hair to the soles of his feet. "Oh, no," the general breathed, his own viewfinder up against his face. "Something's going wrong. Bodhi, prepare the troops for..." Bang! A glut of fire burst out around the door as he was blasted from the wall.
Look out!
Blaster fire zinged past Cody's head as he whirled around to face the destroyed door, DC. 15A swinging up and firing without his conscious thought. Jostling for positions, battle droids poured out of the hole in the wall, but they managed to create a choke point for themselves, only letting 2 or 3 droids in at a time. The commander dropped the first 2 before they could even climb over the remains of the lift doors. "Our position's been compromised." Blue light whipped around in Cody's periphery as the general jumped in front of the men, providing what little cover he could by deflecting blaster bolts meant for them. Settling in at his side, Cody fired through the barely there gaps in the general's defense, falling easily into their familiar rhythm. Obi-Wan burned brightly alongside him in the Force, and Cody found himself reaching down their bond without a thought, reading the general's intent and following it like a drumbeat. The droids were pinned for a brief moment before another part of the wall exploded, this one bigger, and even more of them started to swarm into the room like plague rats. Force take it, but Cody hated being right sometimes. "Obi-Wan." Skywalker's voice was sharp from fear as it came through the general's comlink. "The hell is going on over there? I see blaster fire." "Anakin." Obi-Wan's voice was tight, the only thing that betrayed his unease. "We've been cut off. Somehow, the droids knew we were here." "What? How?" "I have no idea, but we could definitely use some assistance." General Kenobi reached out his hand and flung one of the cannons with the Force, crushing 3 droids underneath it and impaling a 4th on his lightsaber. "Don't worry, Master. I'm on my way." One, 3. Cody downed the droids in quick succession, but they just kept coming. A group of them tried to surround him, and Cody lashed out with a roundhouse kick, using the momentum to spin into 2 more right after. Footing regained, he jammed the butt of his rifle into the vulnerable joint at the base of a droid's head, causing sparks to fly, then swung back around and proceeded to gun down 3 more. "Get after it, sir," one of the men called. Cody was pretty sure it was Chris, pretty sure. "Bash their wobbly heads in." Definitely cries. "Blast 'em. Die, Republic scum." Behind the droids, there was the sound of glass shattering. Then Cody could see the blue glow of another lightsaber and hear the shouts of Torrent Company wading into the fray. Screaming, sizzling, and parts shorn off them, the droids flailed wildly, trying to run away and to kill them all in equal measure. Bursting through the door, General Skywalker charged into the room, Captain Rex hot on his heels. "This way is clear," Anakin shouted, pointing behind him towards the empty room he'd just come from. "How the blazes did you get here?" Obi-Wan asked, lightsabers spinning around in a deadly dance, sending blaster bolts back to their owners with unerring precision. "I improvised, but we gotta go. Troopers, on me." Cody roared, storming towards the room. Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Rex were right there with him, clearing a path and covering their men as they dashed towards the exit. Crashing sounds of banging metal and screaming droids followed as Anakin and Obi-Wan threw anything that wasn't bolted down at the droids with the Force. They all hastily crammed into the lift, Waxer frantically jamming the button for the roof. For a heart-stopping moment, the maglev on the lift groaned like it wasn't going to engage, and then it shot up like a rocket. Spilling out onto the roof, Cody heard the distinct whine of gunship engines and grinned viciously behind his helmet. The ambush may have gone to hell, but the Seppies weren't going to take any more of them out today. Forming a semicircle, they fanned out on the roof, dropping all the clankers that tried to approach the LAATs. Cody slid up next to Rex and cover, on the front edge of their defensive perimeter. They worked in tandem, easily picking targets, helping each other and plugging the holes. Every time he fought with Rex at his side, Cody was reminded of how much he enjoyed it, and how much he enjoyed spending time with Rex, even if they were fighting for their lives during most of it. Rex really rather was his favorite VOD. From the corner of his eye, Cody watched his men board the ships and waited until the last moment to jump in with his general. General Skywalker and Rex leapt in with them, and suddenly Rex reached out through the doors and pulled ahead from the tactical droid as Hawk flew them all to safety. The blast doors slammed shut, plunging the interior of the craft into the dim red glow of the drop lights. Pressing into a circle, the troopers and Cody looked at Rex, who was holding the droid's severed head in his hands. "Now what?" General Skywalker asked in the silence. Rex shrugged, hefting up the droid head. "Maybe this tactical droid will tell us how they knew our plan." "Well, I've certainly heard worse ideas," General Kenobi said with a thoughtful frown. "Do you think you can break the encryption without corrupting the data?" "I'm not really a slicer, but I got a few in mind that can get into it, General." Rex replied easily. He turned the tactical droid head around in his hands a few times, considering. "You think RAM and numbers can get into it, General Skywalker?" "If they can't by themselves, I'm sure the three of us and R2 can." Anakin agreed, smirking. "We can definitely breach those Seppi firewalls." "Then I'll leave the decryption in your capable hands, Anakin Obi," Wan said, the post-battle planning already spinning through his mind. He was mentally assigning roles as they watched him. "We'll debrief on this with Admiral Yularen, and then a strategy meeting. We'll need to come up with something else, and figure out exactly how they knew about our ambush." "We kept this plan need to know, generals. There are a limited number of ways that information could have fallen into enemy hands." "My thoughts as well," Obi-Wan replied, free hand rubbing on his chin. "We'll discuss this more when we get back. The gunship is not the place for this." "Agreed." Soft and quiet conversation filled the cabin as they took the long flight back to the base. Cody was left to his own thoughts, mind mulling over the feeling he'd gotten right before the droids had burst through the door, and the way that it still lingered, less potent, but definitive nonetheless. Whatever trouble had started this morning was currently in progress, and their retreat from the front did not stop it. He looked to General Kenobi, who was at his usual place next to him, the Jedi's face blank, lost in his own contemplation. Kenobi looked up, locking eyes with Cody through his helmet visor, and Cody felt a wave of understanding ripple through him. The general felt it too, and he agreed with Cody. More than he was leaning into Cody's sense of events and the Force. Cody had the thought that the general was so accustomed to that cloying sense of alarm that it hadn't even registered with him the way it had with Cody, who was not at all used to feeling it quite like that. The commander's sense of foreboding was sharp and fresh, while his was dulled and stale. A wry twist made its way onto Obi-Wan's lips as he shared a glance with Cody. Cody mirrored it behind his bucket, but kept his silence. They landed back at the base and disembarked, wounded troopers being carted straight to the infirmary by their more able brothers, shepherded by an attentive Kix. Cody, Rex, General Skywalker, and General Kenobi lingered in the loading zone, watching their men stream off to wherever they were supposed to be. Slick followed after his squad, watching his men with a sharp eye, while Cody watched him. Still, something was not sitting right about the sergeant. Cody shook his head, pulled his helmet off, tucked it under his arm, and turned to face his general, spotting Rex doing the same. Well, I think we got off pretty easy for such an unmitigated disaster of a plan. General Kenobi said into the brief silence, "Yeah, we got lucky." Skywalker agreed pensively. He looked at the tactical droid head in his hands. On the ride over, Rex had handed it to him to fiddle with. "I'll get this to Ram in numbers. Hopefully, they'll be able to make quick work of it. I want to know how the Seppies knew our plans." "Me too, General." Rex had a vicious light in his eyes that promised retribution on the unlucky life form that was responsible for their failure today. "Drop that off, and then meet us in the command center for the debrief." "Anakin," Obi-Wan instructed, walking towards the entrance to the base, the others following behind him. "I need to check in on my Padawan." "I'll go with you," Cody said quickly, trying and failing to keep the eagerness out of his voice. Rex chuckled, smirking at Cody, looking every inch the teasing little brother he was. "Careful, Cody, or we might get the idea that you're excited." Cody rolled his eyes. "Oh, shut up, Rex. Like you weren't going to do the same thing." "No, I was going to check in with my medic." Rex gave him a superior look, tilting his chin up, a wicked gleam in his eyes. "Unlike some people." "The hell you were," Cody shot back quickly, feathers ruffled. He took back everything he ever thought earlier about Rex being his favorite brother. Rex was no longer his favorite. Rex was a first-class pain in the Shebs. Some of Cody's thoughts must have been on his face, because Rex threw his head back and cackled. "Oh, I think I win this round, Cody." "Only in your tiny little mind, Rex." Cody snarled back, giving in to the urge to shove Rex in the shoulder. Rex laughed, dodging most of the hit and shoving back with one of his own. It quickly devolved into a pushing match, each of them trying and failing to get the upper hand on the other, laughing and swearing and kicking up dust. Suddenly, Cody lashed out, clamping an arm around Rex's shoulders, dragging the younger trooper to him, helmet falling to the floor as he vigorously rubbed his knuckles over the top of Rex's head. Cody Carkett, stop." "No!" Rex yelped, the arm that wasn't holding his helmet flailing wildly as he tried to stop the assault on his hair. "Not on your life, Rex. Now, boys." The laughing voice of General Kenobi interrupted their play fighting. Cody and Rex's heads snapped up to look at the general, twin guilty expressions on their faces. Said general was smirking at them, arms crossed and eyes dancing. Skywalker was laughing, one